They went to Paris while I was on an operating table. Here's what I did when I found out. I woke up to the steady beep of a heart monitor and the soft footsteps of nurses changing shifts. The surgery had gone well, they told me, but recovery would take time. I reached for my phone, expecting messages from my family. Instead, there were photos. My parents and my younger sister grinning under the Eiffel Tower, coffee cups raised to the camera. The caption read, "Finally making this dream trip happen." A nurse walked in holding a small stack of mail. She smiled and handed me a postcard, decorated with a watercolor of Venice. "This came to the front desk," she said. "I figured it was yours." On the back, my sister had written, "Hope you're feeling better. We'll tell you all about the trip when we get home." I stared at that postcard longer than I meant to. It wasn't anger I felt. It was confusion. Somewhere between the surgery and that postcard, I realized I no longer knew where I fit in my own family. The Europe trip had been planned for over a year. My emergency surgery had only been scheduled days before their departure, after doctors found a condition that couldn't wait. My parents insisted everything would be fine. The hospital staff would take good care of me. They promised daily video calls. The first call came from the airport. The second came from a restaurant in Paris. After that, the messages got shorter. Eventually, they stopped altogether. One evening, while checking my blood pressure, the nurse glanced around the quiet room. "Had anyone been able to visit?" I smiled politely. "They're traveling," I said. She nodded, no judgment in her face. After a moment, she asked, "Who normally takes care of you?" That question sat with me long after she left. I thought about the house. My grandfather had left it to me years earlier. When he passed, I invited my parents and my sister to keep living there. It seemed practical. We'd agreed everyone would contribute in their own way. At least, that had been the plan. Lying in a hospital bed with nothing else to focus on, I started going through my banking app and old records. Mortgage, insurance, property taxes, utility bills, roof repairs, appliance replacements, car registration, home maintenance. Nearly every recurring expense had my name on it. No one had ever demanded this arrangement. It had just happened, one small decision at a time. Every time someone forgot a payment or put off a repair, I quietly stepped in. After enough years, my support stopped looking generous and started looking ordinary. Recovery gave me something I hadn't experienced in years: silence. Without constantly solving everyone else's problems, I could finally hear my own thoughts. By the time I was discharged, the house was empty. The quiet felt unfamiliar. I walked from room to room, noticing how much energy I'd spent, building a life that revolved around everyone else's comfort. There was no dramatic moment, no shouting, no slammed doors, just a growing realization that I'd confused responsibility with being taken for granted. The following week, I met with a real estate agent. The house was legally mine, and maintaining it alone no longer made sense. I put it in writing to my family that I intended to sell the property. I gave them enough time to make arrangements once they got home. Then I looked at the family car. Everyone drove it, but I was the registered owner. Insurance, maintenance, gas, and repairs had always come out of my account. Selling it would help cover my rehab costs and give me flexibility for a fresh start. So I sold it, not to make a statement, simply because it was the practical choice. Around the same time, a consulting client offered me a fully remote position. The work could be done from anywhere with a reliable internet connection. I said yes. A month later, I rented a small apartment in a quiet coastal town a few hours away. Before I left, I hired contractors to get the house ready for sale. Since workers would need unrestricted access, I changed the locks. Every family member received written instructions explaining where important documents were kept and how to retrieve personal belongings once they contacted the real estate agent. Nothing was hidden. Everything was organized. When the house sold, I put copies of every financial document into labelled folders. I also included refund checks for the security deposits my parents had paid years earlier, even though those amounts were a fraction of the property's ongoing expenses. Weeks later, my phone rang. "We're home," my father said quietly. His voice sounded less angry than uncertain. "The neighbours told us the house sold." "Yes," I answered, a long pause. I didn't realise things had reached this point. "I don't think any of us did," I replied. We agreed to meet the following weekend. The conversation lasted almost 3 hours. No one raised their voice. My mother admitted they'd convinced themselves I preferred handling everything, because I rarely complained. My sister looked embarrassed as she described scrolling through vacation photos and suddenly realising not one single message had asked how my recovery was going. "I just assumed someone else was checking on you," she said. My father clasped his hands together. "I thought sticking to the vacation plans was respecting your independence." Looking back, I think it just avoided an uncomfortable decision. For the first time in years, no one got defensive right away. Everyone listened. Finally, I said the words I hadn't fully understood until that hospital stay. I didn't leave because of a vacation. I left because I realized I was becoming everyone's safety net, including my own. I needed to find out who I was without carrying all the responsibility. No one argued. There wasn't much to argue about. The months that followed weren't perfect, but they were different. My parents rented a smaller place that suited their needs better. My sister found an apartment with friends and for the first time started managing her own finances. Family visits became intentional instead of convenient. When they came to see me on the coast, they called ahead. They brought dinner instead of expecting me to cook. Conversations felt lighter because expectations were finally clear. Looking back, I don't think the Europe trip ended our old way of living. It just revealed it. Sometimes the biggest changes don't start with dramatic confrontations. They start with a quiet question asked in a hospital room. "Who normally takes care of you?" For years I never